Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the OVS VAP Training Center webinar, The Way Forward, Working with College-Age Survivors of Assault in 2020 and Beyond. I'm Blake Cush, the Director of Training and Outreach at OVS, and our Director, Elizabeth Cronin, is also with us today, and she will offer some opening remarks and introductions shortly after I cover a little webinar housekeeping. Today's webinar will have an ASL interpreter on video, and the best way to view this is to update your personal WebEx layout to active speaker and thumbnail video view or to grid view, which are options that are at the top of your screen. And you can also actually pin our interpreter as well. It locks her in. We have the chat feature enabled for this webinar as well. We hope to have as much interaction with you as today as possible. And if not already, you can open or activate the chat feature by clicking on the call out icon on the bottom of your screen. It will turn blue when it's activated. Each webinar we offer through our VAP Training Center, including today's, is recorded, and the links to these videos are made available on the OVS training page, which is just ovs.ny.gov/training. And they can also be accessed via our OVS training YouTube channel, which is there's a link to that on the training page as well. Finally, as you exit today's webinar, you'll be directed to an evaluation survey on the presentation. Please take a couple minutes and give us feedback. These evaluations really help us improve and foster a continuous improvement process through all of our trainings, and it's extremely valuable to us, and we share it with it is anonymous, and we share all that feedback with our panelists so that they too can have a record of how to improve and make things better. So we appreciate that. It takes about less than 2 or 3 minutes. It's 11 or 12 questions. When you do exit, you'll be prompted. WebEx will prompt you with a warning that you're being transferred to a research.net, which is a SurveyMonkey tool. It is a safe to click or safe to open hyperlink, so have no fear. With that said, I'd like to formally welcome the Office of Victim Services Director, Elizabeth Cronin. She'll get us started.
Thanks so much, Blake
Sure.
and Rachel, for setting up this webinar. There are over 465 people registered for this webinar, so I have to say I think there might be some interest in this particular subject. And for those of you who were with us in June, we did the first part of this series, and now we're calling this basically 2.0. But it's working with college-age survivors of sexual assault in 2020 and beyond. So, we've learned about Title IX, what the ramifications are of the changes that were proposed by the Department of Education. Now we want to talk about where that litigation is and what sort of resources are available for victims, whether, no matter what happens with the litigation, we need to make sure that everybody's aware of all of the resources and assistance that are out there. So I'm thrilled today to welcome back 2 of my former co-presenters. So we have Joseph Storch and Elizabeth Brady. Most of you who do this work know Joe, and a lot of you know Elizabeth. Joe is Associate Counsel in the SUNY Office of General Counsel, and he's chair of the Student Affairs Practice Group. I've been seeing an awful lot of emails where they've been doing the Student Conduct Institute and welcoming universities all over the country to be part of it. It's been pretty impressive, Joe. He concentrates his practice on student affairs, intellectual property, campus safety. He's a principal investigator. He is tireless in pursuit of funding sources for violence prevention and response on campuses and within the community. He oversees that, as I said, the Student Conduct Institute, which offers compliance and best practice training. And it's been very popular among universities in the country, especially with what's happening at the Department of Education. He also served in 2015 as a technical advisor to the governor's Enough is Enough initiative. And he's been, since 2016, overseeing the SUNY's Got Your Back program, which is funded through the Office of Victim Services. And those of you who run sexual assault or domestic violence programs, I'm sure have seen the backpacks that contain personal care items and notes and information for sexual assault and domestic violence victims. So welcome, Joe. I'm going to do kind of truncated introductions. Elizabeth works alongside Joe. She's director of the Sexual and Interpersonal Violence Prevention Program at SUNY. And she also has been working on the SUNY's Got Your Back program and doing really quite amazing work in figuring out venues for this to take place and organizing programs that bring the campus community together with the students so that there is a continuum of understanding by students that there will be help available to them if they find or if their friends find themselves in this position. And finally, we're welcoming for the first time Jessica Morak, who is at the Sanctuary for Families program in the city. She's a campus advocates program director. She works with survivors of sexual violence, intimate partner violence, sex trafficking, cyber sexual abuse, and all other forms of gender-based violence. She works closely to assist victims and survivors, including student survivors of gender violence, in navigating legal systems. And as we know, there are often many civil legal consequences of being victimized. And so it's important for there to be programs available, and attorneys who know how to assist victims and get them through these different silos of the legal system. She is a former assistant DA in the Bronx and was with the Child Abuse and Sex Crimes Bureau, where she investigated and prosecuted sexual assaults against children and adults, which is work that I did with the Westchester County DA's office. So I appreciate the work that she has done. All right, so those are the introductions. You can see our slide here with all our happy faces, and we call the pictures below our photographs are like the before times, I guess we refer to it. You know, when we could go out in public together and not wear masks and be standing close together, arms linked. Those were good times. And in fact, the picture of Elizabeth and Joe and I at the Islanders game was the last public event I attended. So, and probably you guys too, when we did a SUNY's Got Your Back program, which was really successful and very exciting, how we were getting into the athletic arenas with our program, and then bam, you know, everything came to a stop. So we are learning to navigate different waters, but and learning to do it, you know, well, to make sure that we continue to serve victims. So what's up next? Next slide. All right, so Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit, you know, as a follow-up to what we discussed on the last Title IX webinar. And then we're going to get into a discussion with Elizabeth and myself about what some of the resources are between SUNY and the Office of Victim Services.
Excellent. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks so much for welcoming us again. And thank you to Rachel and to Blake for setting this up. It's great to be with you. We are now 10 days out from the implementation date for the final rule under Title IX. Colleges and universities across the country have been doing whatever they can to get into compliance as quickly as possible. If you tuned into the last one, you saw we were talking about 2,033 pages and 87 days to implement. So certainly quite a large lift. I want to give you a very brief update before we turn to our next topic, which is on the 4 lawsuits. 2 of the lawsuits, the one filed by 17 states and the District of Columbia in DC, and the one filed by our state of New York in the Southern District of New York, are at the preliminary injunction stage. Those are joined, meaning those states have moved. There's been a response. a reply brief was filed, and there has been oral argument. As of literally 5 minutes before we started this website, I checked Pacer, and there was no decision in either of them. We are anticipating hearing, but we do not know if we will receive an injunction in one, both, or neither. And so we are moving ahead with the implementation. And I would commend you to the first webinar we did on this and some of the resources that we have put out from SUNY for more information specific to Title IX. At this point, I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth C. To talk about OVS, and then Elizabeth B. We're going to go down the alphabet, all the Elizabeths, to talk about some of the work we're doing at SUNY. So Elizabeth Cronin, back to you.
So much, Joe. So first of all, I have to apologize. The storm is directly over my house, I think. So my neighbor's tree just fell down and my dog is very agitated. So if I yelp, it's because something has come down in my yard or on my house. So, you know, part of working with SUNY has been to figure out, you know, how best to provide information and services to victims. You know, OVS is an agency that serves all crime victims, so it's not limited to sexual assault or domestic violence. But those, of course, end up being a large part of who we serve. And, you know, part of our incentive in working together with SUNY is that, you know, after the White House report came out under President Obama, there was a lot of focus and attention on students and crime victimization against college students. And so, you know, we started to talk about how we could be more collaborative in making sure that students who come from all over the world and don't often understand that if they are a student in the state of New York, they are eligible for services from programs that we fund and would be eligible for financial compensation as well, because the act occurred here. So there's a lot of either misinformation or a lack of information about what's available to them. And so that was part of what led us to begin working together to make sure that, you know, the SUNY's Got Your Back project is, you know, it's giving comfort items, but a lot of what's underlying this idea was to get information to them, you know, where they can call to get help. And Elizabeth's going to talk a little bit more about that. There's a lot of Elizabeths on this call, so I apologize, but Elizabeth B. will be giving more information about that. So I think a lot of you, if not most of you or all of you on the call, know about the Office of Victim Services. We started in 1966 as a crime victim compensation board, and we have evolved over the last 50-something years, where we have a three-part mission. We provide financial compensation to, there's a note saying that they can't hear us, so I'll try to sit closer to the mic, I guess. That we provide financial compensation to crime victims, and just as importantly, we fund well over 200 victim assistance programs throughout the state of New York. And those programs may specifically be addressing a particular type of victimization. It might be a rape crisis program, it might be a domestic violence program, one for elder abuse. But all of those programs must assist any victim who walks through their door with filing a compensation claim. And a lot of programs that are not specifically dedicated to a particular crime victim issue will still assist victims with counseling and other needs of any type. So it's important for those who have people in their lives who have been victimized or know someone who has, or they themselves have been a victim, to understand that these resources are available to them. So there's a whole litany of different types of compensation that victims are available, that are available for victims. One of the most important is the forensic rape exam. which is completely confidential and free to victims. They should not be billed for those services. So if a victim shows up at a licensed medical professional's office or a hospital in the state of New York and reports that they were sexually assaulted, they should be getting a complete forensic rape exam at no cost to them. The hospital should not be putting this through to insurance unless the victim specifically consents to that and asks for that to happen. This will include a 7-day starter pack for HIV PEP meds if the medical person decides that that's appropriate. And now, under recent legislation, a person who's under the age of 18 can get a 28-day starter pack right up front. So there's a lot available that we need to get the message out about. What we tell the communities that we serve is, tell victims, don't wait until it's too late. Get tested, get your medical services taken care of right away so you know that you're healthy. And also, any evidence that's available is preserved. So if and when a victim decides that they want to pursue a criminal action, the evidence will not be lost. So I don't know how much, I don't want to belabor this because I think a lot of people know about OVS, but maybe let's go over to Elizabeth B. and talk a little bit about the resources that are offered through SUNY, because they're pretty amazing.
Thanks, Elizabeth C. And thank you for having us once again. It's always really wonderful to have the chance to present with our OVS colleagues and to have Jessica here as well. We are excited to have the opportunity to share our SAVR resource, which just turned 5 years old a few days ago. What started as very much so a back of the envelope idea proposed by a student to create a one-stop shop for folks to go and see what resources are available to them has really grown quite a bit. So Joe has it open right now, and as you can see, he just pulled down SUNY Delhi, and when you scroll down, immediately all of the on-campus resources are opened up. All listed and all categorized. The lock indicates confidential, the shield indicates police or law enforcement, the 24-hour symbol, 24 hours a day. And if you look where his mouse is hovering, you can click for off-campus resources to see what is within a 25-mile radius, or you can click the drop down to make it a little bit smaller, say if you're in New York City. And you can filter by type of resource that's available. And the way that these are listed initially is something we're really proud of because they're listed or they're geocoded and then listed as by distance from the place that's been identified. We do that because we think it's really important to not put a thumb on the scale in terms of where a victim or survivor goes. We recognize the importance of reinstilling choice and not sort of forcing anyone to do any one thing or the other. So the lock indicates confidential. We have LGBTQIA+ resources, 24 hours, and folks can click on the Google Maps to take them right to the resource, or they can click the contact information to immediately touch base with that organization. Beyond searching by campus, we do say SAVR is for everyone. So anyone in New York State can access and use this resource as a way to find different spaces to go. So if someone wanted to type in a zip code, I don't know, Joe, you make one. Can you pick one? Let's do one. Yeah, there you go. That'll take you to.
We have a couple questions just about what this resource is. People are very interested and want to make sure they're noting that.
Sure. So the name of the resource, this is SUNY SAVR, Sexual Assault and Violence Response Resource. Folks can access it by going to response.suny.edu or Googling SUNY SAVR, and that's in the chat right now as well.
Is it an app?
It's not an app, but it is designed specifically to be mobile friendly, so folks can access it on their phone. After partnering with OVS to release window clings on all of our campuses just before the shutdown, we were able to track really, really high level analytics. So we saw that probably 90% of our access hits were from mobile devices, which is great because it means that students, that the population sort of that we're working with is definitely accessing it. And Joe's showing now the feature where you can search on the actual map. There's a locate me or find me feature on the map where folks can go and access the resources. And at the bottom, we have important policy language included, and that's been hand translated into 120 languages, as well as ASL. And these are, we contracted with translators to just use Google Translate to sort of in recognition of the fact that when someone is experiencing trauma, it's really important that they have access to information in the language that's most comfortable for them. And this is the ASL translation. Our colleague out of Binghamton University had done this for us. Joe, could you walk folks through the visa side of it? I'm worried that there might be a lag, so do you mind speaking?
Sure. I will just switch to a different campus, and just to show for immigrant and international students, we have a visa resource. It's translated into 120 languages, and it lets students know how can they report on campus, how can they report off campus. We talk about U and T. We talk about where they can get additional information on visa options, was an immigration lawyer, and where can I find one. And again, this resource is hand translated into 120 languages. I just happened to pick Malaysian. So if you are working with immigrant and international victims of violence who are on college campuses, this is perfectly relevant. But if you are working with immigrant and international or folks who do not speak English as a first language anywhere in the state of New York, if you Google SUNY Visa or go to suny.edu/visa, you can customize this, you can download it, it comes translated, and it is completely free, paid for by the State University of New York, or a grant, from the State University of New York.
Thank you. So two other resources that we wanted to touch on, our SUNY's Got Your Back program, which I'll talk about in a second, and our Spectrum conference. For the past 2 years, we've been hosting a conference called SUNY Spectrum, which is violence prevention and response for members of the LGBTQIA+ community, because we do recognize that they are disproportionately impacted by sexual and interpersonal violence, and less likely to seek support or report what happened to them. So we worked with OVS and DCJS and hosted this conference. Obviously, this past year, we weren't able to have the live rendition of Spectrum, but the week of August 24th through the 28th, we will be having a digital Spectrum, which we're very, very excited about. And more information in terms of schedule is available on our website, suny.edu/events/spectrum. And then SUNY's Got Your Back. Many of the folks on this call have requested and received bags. We have a team of really, really wonderful professionals who have generally gone out to our campuses or come out with us to different public spaces to assemble comfort kits, then go to your agencies. And now we've sort of shifted the way that the bags are put together. Our staff have been doing socially distant assembly lines to put things together, but we are very much so still delivering and accepting requests. We realize it's more important than ever that we're continuing to provide comfort kits to folks. So anyone who serves victims or survivors of crime or violence may request bags through our website or the tiny URL listed on the screen. So with that, I think that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Jessica.
Just before we get started with Jessica, I'm interested in, Joe, the SAVR resource is just so incredible, and the amount of information in there and the fact that it's translated into over 100 languages is so critical, because universities tend to be very international. Can anybody get that? Can anybody download SAVR?
Absolutely. Anybody can use SAVR. They can search on a map. They could find themselves by a zip code. Anyone can download for free our translations of the 129B, affirmative consent, amnesty, Bill of Rights, and first response language. Anyone can access and download the visa. And anyone, please let us know if you don't see your resource there, or sometimes, a phone number has changed or the like. We do check it several times per year. We go line by line, but we're always responsive to the community. We have well over 1,000 resources packed in to our database, and that has been entirely created by our colleagues at SUNY, and it's just been a tremendous or a privilege to work on it. Well over 56,000 people have made use of the SAVR resource, and we're just very, very proud that it's part of getting folks, frankly, to the people who are on the call. So it could be the first step that gets folks to the agencies that are with us on the call.
You know how much envy I have for the SAVR, that you were able to do that so quickly and comprehensively. Joe, one other question I have for you is, for those people who were not on the last webinar, do you think you could give just a really brief highlight of what the issues are that are being litigated and why this whole thing is so important?
Absolutely. So the department did a couple of things in Title IX. It narrowed the definitions of what behavior is covered under that nearly 50-year-old civil rights law, while adding significant due process requirements in order to actually investigate and adjudicate a case, well beyond anything that we have seen in federal law or state law, any court case, and the like. In New York, of course, in the 2015 129B, enough is enough. It's a traditional balanced approach where the goal is to make sure as many students can succeed through the system as possible. In the Title IX final rule, the goal is frankly to put a thumb on the scale to make it more difficult to investigate and adjudicate. The department was concerned about people being falsely accused and the like, and there's quite a bit out there about that. So there are a number of issues being litigated. Primarily, it's an Administrative Procedures Act case that the Department of Education exceeded its authority. It did not tie the requirements to discrimination on the basis of sex. It says, we think this is a good policy, we think this is a good idea, but it didn't show that men or women, gender, non-binary individuals are affected more or less by this final rule or by a system that does not use the final rule. And there are some other issues that are raised, and primarily from a timing standpoint, the department, I think, is aware that we are going through a national pandemic. And I'm pretty sure that they've heard about it. And even as they send out letter after letter after letter saying, we'll give you more time on Clery, we'll give you more time on financial aid, we'll give you more time on FAFSA, this is the only thing where they put out 2,033 very complicated, sometimes contradictory pages, and are requiring us to be in full compliance, trained on it, policies changed, negotiating with collective bargaining units, etc., within 87 days, which is shorter than anything we've ever seen. The department said in litigation, well, we only had to give 60 days, so we gave an extra 27 days because of the pandemic. And the argument is, well, thank you, very kind of you. But given that we usually get upwards of 8 months to comply with requirements that are about 10% of the length of this, the 87 days is not sufficient.
Okay, great. Thank you. I saw a chat by Colin Coughlin at Equinox DV in Albany, and they are on the SAVR website, but they wanted to let us know that they have an online chat feature recently introduced, which is fantastic. So I'm sure that SUNY will be adding that to their resource. And, it's really important to point out that with the pandemic, which apparently the Department of Education doesn't believe, that we've had to really think very differently about how we are doing things. And so adding this text feature has been really critical for for victims to be able to communicate under circumstances where they might otherwise not be able to. So that's really good news, Colin. Thanks for sharing that information. Elizabeth, I have a question for you before we get to Jessica. So the SUNY's Got Your Back. Just tell people who aren't familiar with it, like what is that? What goes into it? You know, what are you trying to do through that program?
Sure. So we kicked off this program a few years ago, initially intending for it to be a one-year campaign as a way to kind of give back to the programs that were serving so many of our students. And our SUNY campuses within 24 hours had pledged way more than we had originally planned on. And we realized that after that, as well as after a conversation with you, where you really never seemed to dream small, it was going to be a lot bigger than we had originally thought it was going to be. So we connected to expand the program, where over the past few years, we've really worked to go beyond just providing comfort kits to folks, but also as a way to reach out and engage students and community members, especially because a lot of our SUNY campuses can be a central community location and can be an important gateway to maybe some of our more vulnerable community members and families. And we're able to give them information about resources like, you know, the victim service providers or their local rape crisis programs, or just a lot of resources that are available to them that they otherwise might not know about. So we really try to create a fun and engaging party atmosphere for students to want to come through and put a bag together. And we also know that this sort of group of college-age students right now are very drawn to philanthropic activities. So we call it the Trojan horse of outreach education, because students come through and they think that they're just going to be making a bag. But in reality, we've really built in education every step of the way. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is being able to provide really high quality personal care items to folks after they've experienced a sexual assault or they're seeking services for domestic violence. Because of our scale, and we are making so many at once, we've been able to work with really large vendors to get pricing down and really increase the quality of the products that actually go into the bags.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is when people from the community come to assist, that they're not making bags for themselves. We have to remind them sometimes. But, you know, that underscores how, you know, despite how things have changed over the last few months, there's still a great need for these bags, that, you know, victims need to know that sources, resources, hospitals, providers, they're open. They might be delivering services in a bit of a different way. You know, some are they're doing it remotely, but, you know, if a victim needs a sexual assault exam, they can get a sexual assault exam, and they should. You know, don't wait until it's too late. And SUNY will continue to send these bags out. And I just saw a note that the victims really appreciate this. Every bag has a personal note, you know, just stay strong, or, you know, whatever the person's writing on the card is, and then signing it, you know, letting them know that somebody's thinking about them in this really difficult time. So it's a very personal thing. And it's just a, you know, an intention to make sure that that person gets what they need so that they can heal. So, all right, now we're going to go to Jessica, and she's going to be talking about the Campus Advocates Project, which is very exciting. Jessica?
Thank you everyone so much for having me and including me in this discussion. And a personal note, thank you so much to the Office of Victim Services. Because of the Office of Victim Services, we actually have the Campus Advocates Project and my job, as I am an OVS grantee. So thank you very much. I've also been at a couple of SUNY Got Your Back events throughout the year, and they're all fantastic and wonderful. So thank you for all of the work that you do. Again, my name is Jessica Morak. I am a staff attorney at Sanctuary for Families. Sanctuary for Families is New York City's one of New York City's largest service providers for survivors of gender-based violence, and that can be domestic violence, sex trafficking, cybersexual abuse, and sexual violence, and all other related forms of gender violence. Today, I wanted to talk about the Campus Advocates Project, which I am an attorney for at Sanctuary for Families, which started with a partnership with Columbia University in 2015. So we have a contract with Columbia University Sanctuary for Families, where we act as the attorney advisors for all survivors in Title IX matters at Columbia University. We are assigned at the outset of each case. What happened after other schools started to hear that we had this partnership with Columbia University, there was an interest in how can we provide services to our survivor students. And so we applied for an OVS grant and we were given one. And that is how the Campus Advocates Project was born. So we provide services to students considering the Title IX process, the criminal justice system, as Elizabeth Cronin mentioned earlier, I am a former sex crimes prosecutor, as is she, as well as the family court system or the civil justice system, or who are just seeking to, as we like to call, system map or explore their legal options and speak to an attorney, a confidential and privileged attorney, for free because of the OVS grant. Next slide, please. Thank you. So who do we receive referrals from? Well, we receive them from other advocacy groups and organizations, as well as colleges and university Title IX departments, and more recently from our criminal justice partners, either the New York City Police Department or district attorney offices that we have relationships with. Many of our clients are unable to afford representation or are attending city or community colleges. And so they need and are really in need of free legal counsel. Oftentimes, we have cases that involve two perpetrators that go to the same school, each seeking legal counsel or attorney advisors in the Title IX matter, and we can represent survivor students in those cases. But many times we are getting cases where the perpetrator is not someone who goes to the same school as the survivor, and it's not a Title IX matter, but it might be something where they need an order of protection through family court or considering reporting to the police or going through a criminal justice case, but don't know what that's going to look like. Right? And so come to us and we actually speak with them about what that will be like on a very micro level from start to finish, and then actually help them report to either the police or district attorney's offices and do pre-arrest investigations. We work with students who have been in long-term or short-term relationships or maybe just met or classmates. Our common cases include sexual assault, cybersexual abuse, which I am the co-chair of the New York City Cybersexual Abuse Task Force. So that's something that we really focus on lately, stalking and sexual harassment cases. Next slide, thank you. So just as an overview, we do consultations as well as direct representation and advocacy. So our consultations start with expectation management and system mapping, really understanding, I know these legal systems exist, but what does that mean for my particular case? What does that mean for what I'm going to experience? And it's really helpful to know that potentially before you start in that legal system. So you can decide which pathway to safety and justice is best for you, or pathways, because many of these cases can happen simultaneously. We can represent students via direct representation who are pursuing orders of protection in family courts. We also can act as attorney advisors for students in Title IX investigations. And I think this is such a critical service, especially now with the new Title IX regulations sort of looming in the horizon, especially with the understanding that we expect hearings going forward to include cross-examination by attorney advisors, and understanding that educational universities are now required to provide an advisor. It doesn't have to be an attorney, but it has to be that there has to be an advisor provided if one student doesn't have one. And we expect to see in the future that many schools will be providing attorney advisors. And we've started to get interest from many educational universities to work with the Campus Advocates Project. A huge program that we do is criminal justice advocacy, as well as educational outreach. We do Know Your Rights presentations for the criminal justice system and the Title IX system, as well as demystifying the sexual offense evidence collection kits, which is a tool used during the forensic rape examinations. So we're here to help survivors. We're here to assist, and we have, confidentiality and privilege, and we would welcome any discussion.
Elizabeth, you're muted. I'm going to unmute you.
Hey, Elizabeth, before you continue though, real quick, I just wanted to announce and let people know that the Capital Region, many counties within the Capital Region are under tornado warning and tornado watch right now. So be safe, take care of yourselves. We're just wanted to throw it out in case you hadn't heard yet.
Yeah, that's why I muted myself. I figured either my screaming or my dog barking, if something fell through my roof, would not be a good look. So thanks, Jessica. And I think one of the questions was, is this program that you have only in New York City? And if so, are you aware of anyone else who's doing this kind of work?
So we are not just in New York City, and actually due to the COVID pandemic, many of the Title IX investigations have been moved to virtual hearings and virtual investigations. So we have started helping students not only in upstate New York and other parts of New York, but actually outside of New York who are requesting our assistance.
What do you find most challenging about this work?
I think what can be incredibly challenging is there is so much information that student survivors specifically are obligated, and the onus is on them to understand. And I think there are so many systems that can come into play, and it's an overwhelming amount of information that is expected of students to understand. And so that's why we focus so heavily under the Campus Advocacy Project and at Sanctuary for Families in general on information, 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 right? If you are informed about your choices, about your rights, you can make an informed decision. And that decision might be to pursue a legal case, and it also might be to not. But at least you're making that decision based on information rather than confusion or fear. And that's really the goal of the Campus Advocates Project. And I have found that most students who come to me, or individuals in general, feel so overwhelmed when they speak to me and first walk into my office, and then leave feeling like they have a roadmap and they're in control, they're in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I think the word information is probably one of the most critical. If you don't know what's out there, if you don't know what you need to do, if you don't know what your options are, you can't make informed decisions. And it just leads to the trauma and confusion after the fact. So that's a fantastic program. So I'm going to take this time to plug the Crime Victim Legal Network. Is Remla on the call by any chance today? Remla from Empire Justice.
She might be on, Elizabeth, but she can't talk through unless she's a panelist.
Okay, so I just wanted to plug, Remla is the director of the Crime Victim Legal Network through Empire Justice, and this was a collaboration between OVS, SUNY, not this SUNY, another SUNY, there's a million offices in SUNY, and Empire Justice and Pro Bono. And yeah, thank you, Blake, is posting the website. So this was a grant that we got through the Office of Victims of Crime at the Justice Department, and we collaborated with those partners to develop an online tool for victims who need civil legal assistance. And then we issued an RFA for programs to apply to hire attorneys. And those attorneys are part of this network. So if someone needs a warm referral, they can go to one of these programs where there are attorneys available to assist them to navigate through, financial issues, fraud issues, custody, immigration, housing, all those civil legal needs that arise as a result of victimization. So, there's when we did a needs assessment, that was what everybody was telling us, that civil legal needs are crucial. And so, Jessica's presentation made that very clear, that whether it's what I've been talking about through the CVLN or the work that they're doing with the Title IX stuff, people need counsel. They shouldn't be expected to have to negotiate some really complicated stuff on their own. So now I figured we have a few minutes left that we could have a discussion about, what's important here. Where are we going? What's the future that we're looking at? We've had to sort of reconfigure a lot of what we've been doing because of COVID, and we don't know, like, if school's going back in the fall. Some universities, some lower schools have gone back and they've had to close because students are getting sick. So we don't know what is going to happen with that. But how is this going to play into some of the work that you're doing? Joe, you want to start?
Sure. This is obviously a very difficult time for folks at all parts of society. For us, we've seen, and Elizabeth has been doing some incredible work around the increase in incidents of violence and how we serve folks in a distance environment. Actually, both Elizabeths on this call have been doing incredible work around that, and we need to rethink that. And in some ways, we've learned that there are some services that we used to insist had to be done in person, and we've seen, well, as long as you can get a secure connection and the like, we can do more things by phone, by Zoom, by teleconference. So I think we're getting some good lessons out of there. There's more training we could deliver. Jessica was mentioning she can serve victims and survivors who are much further away from her office because they don't necessarily need to meet in person. So
do you think it's less intimidating for victims to not have to appear in person, but can do it through video?
I don't know. Let me pass that on to Jessica or Elizabeth, who have much more direct services and sort of get their thoughts on that. I'll pass on that one.
Hi, all. I would definitely say the answer is yes to that question. And for a lot of the downstate schools that already had implemented live hearings, we were asking as advocates to have testimony be on closed circuit TV so that the students were never in the same room. But if there was going to be, continued hearings, that they could hear each other. So I think I have heard from my students that I'm working with have been pleased that these hearings and investigations will be virtual so that there is still help going on through the pandemic, but actually find it more comfortable to go through it on a virtual setting.
Elizabeth B.
I think that this is an interesting question. And I'd have to echo Jessica. I think that you're right, especially when it comes to hearings and investigations. I think that that's a really good point. There's been a bit of research done there. I think that it's going to really depend on the specific individual and their circumstances, and whether it's DV or sexual assault, and how safe they are sort of in their space. But so I don't know if I could speak one way or the other, but what I am happy is that New York State in general has so many incredibly qualified advocates and service providers who have always provided individualized services to folks. So really being able to gauge where folks are and understand the best way to kind of help them in that situation. But yeah, COVID's really, this is a very complicated situation. I've been working with some colleagues on sort of discussions around pandemic safety planning, and then working with student survivors and just, survivors within the community on creating safety plans in the context of a pandemic. And there's definitely a lot of additional complicated factors that come into the mix.
I've heard from some providers that particularly younger people like the online counseling better than having to actually go to someone's office. So, for some people, in the same way that I suppose the online education works for somebody who's an introvert or a child who's being bullied at school, it doesn't work for everybody, but having the different options available is important. So What would you say are the biggest challenges that we face with Title IX? Like, is there anything else coming up, Joe, that we should be aware of or worried about?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, we're building this airplane as we're flying it going into August 14th. And with all respect to the administration, it could not have come at a worse time. We have generally been doing the same thing since about 1997. I was telling colleagues that, Belle Biv DeVoe and Paula Abdul were on the radio when some of these obligations came online, right? And we're changing it in the time of a pandemic, in the time where we're already having a
You're going
hard
to
time
explain to Blake what that means.
I'm Googling it.
Googling it, right? And
Yeah.
we're having to explain it to students at a time where it's really hard for them to focus on anything but the immediate. This is Maslow's hierarchy in reverse, right? And the department is saying, well, why don't you do this thing that they see as sort of at the sort of self-actualizing level? They would probably argue it's at the core safety level. And our students are like, I don't know where I'm going to eat. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know where I'm going to stay. I don't know if my classes are going to be online, hybrid. I may have kids. I may have elderly parents. I may have people in my family who are sick. We've had 25,000 New Yorkers who have passed away. It's a real challenge. And so I think one of the reasons that we initially came together was to empower agencies that serve victims and survivors as much as practicable to be able to get you a plain language explanation of what's going on, which is what we did in the first webinar. And in the second one, how we're going to go beyond it, because you are going to have people who are going to say to you, what on earth is going on? I thought I took this training last year and they said this, and now it's the opposite, especially at some, smaller private colleges that might have been using a single investigator model or a hybrid model that might not have the hearing model that maybe large institutions and publics do. So it's going to be very, very difficult, on top of issues that are very difficult, on top of financial challenges and trying to do more with less that every college is facing. It is really putting gasoline onto a very difficult fire.
Yeah, it's timing couldn't be worse, but it's 2020, so that's all we need to say about that.
Yeah.
Does Rachel or Blake, do you see any questions in there that the panelists can respond to before we sort of wrap it up?
Yes, I do. So just for everyone to know, we scheduled up to 90 minutes for this webinar. So while we're coming up on 2 o'clock, we will stay open and on the line to answer questions. We've had quite a few come through. Make sure you are typing into your chat to all panelists. That ensures that if I miss something, any one of the people up here will be able to see it. A couple quick things. This is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel within about 1 to 3 days. I know some people came in late or they had to leave early, so this will be up there. All of our webinars are recorded in there, so we'll share a link to that page shortly. Blake, if you're able to do that, that would be great. I'm going to go through the list of our questions kind of starting from the beginning. One of the things that has come up over and over is a list of these resources that everybody's been talking about. So I would be happy to, if Elizabeth, Jessica, Joe, other Elizabeth, everyone, if anybody wants to send me a list, I'll make sure that I include that in our recap email that we send once the link is live. We'd be happy to send those resources through. We will also post that information on our new VAP Connect website, which is a forum for all of our VAP to join, interact, and network. So we'll post it there as well. The first question, or some things that have come through, is there are a lot of people with the SAVR list that have said they have updates or they're not seeing some things. Is there somewhere that they should reach out to? I've gotten about 4 or 5 people that have said, oh, what about this? What about this? Who should they reach out to directly to share that information?
Yeah, very, very easily. Right on the bottom of SAVR, I'll go to the main, just so people see as it opens new. And right on the bottom here, to add or update a resource on this site, and you click it, it'll open up an email to our colleague Lisa Campo, and you can just type in there what changes you want. And usually 24, 48 hours, sometime sooner, we'll update that. So that is the absolute fastest way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. The next question from the SUNY portion was, are the resources under the list only list SUNY schools or private schools as well in New York State?
Right now, this is all the SUNY schools. We don't have the staffing right now to put, set it up and include that for the 200 private schools and CUNY. That is a goal, that is a long-term goal, and something we would like to implement one day. We're not there yet.
Joe, are you going to be asking me for more money?
No.
Is that a plug?
Probably. I mean, basically what we don't even need money. It's not even that there's a cost to it. We need to be able to carve out people's time. That's what we really need. So right now everybody is well overbooked. But I do hope that at some point we can carve out a staff member's time. We can reach out to the private colleges and CUNY. We could put their stuff up. Because that is a long-term goal, and in fact, every once in a while we put in for DOJ funds and things like that to create kind of this as a national model. Because we would love for them to have a SAVR in North Carolina and a SAVR in Tennessee and a SAVR in Alaska, it's so something in the long run. But for right now, it is very comprehensive, but only for the SUNY schools. But hopefully we can add that on.
Great, thank you. We have another question regarding HIV prophylaxis. So they have said that OVS has made phenomenal progress in supplying the full 28 days of HIV prophylaxis free of charge during a SANE exam. However, we do have many students under the age of 18 or from 18 to 26 who don't want to disclose to their parents a sexual assault and therefore can't use their insurance for the remaining medication. Do we know if there's anything in the works for these college-age students?
This is an issue that we have talked about a lot over the years because it's complicated. And, the reason that we haven't been able to do it is a legal reason because we have to have people who can sign for compensation who are over the age of 18 because if they end up if something gets paid and we have to get reimbursement from the person, they have to be old enough to sign a contract. So it's certainly something that's complicated and that we're well aware of the barrier that creates. And so we are still talking about it. And it makes me think that maybe we need to do yet another one of these with those kinds of questions.
And if anybody else has any questions they've seen, definitely pop in. But a question for Jessica. Is the Campus Advocates Project only for the New York City area? I believe you already answered that it is available to those outside of the New York City area specifically, correct?
Yes. In New York State as a whole, and with Title IX, going virtual as it has, for those students who might be outside of the New York State area, we are also, able to work with those students. But we have started taking cases from, university and colleges all the way upstate, or in other parts, in other boroughs, Long Island, so yes, we are available.
Jessica, do people seem to be aware of what's coming with the changes? Like, are you seeing well, I mean, I assume the universities are well informed about it, or should be, but are you hearing from the field at all? Are they aware of what's coming down the pike?
I definitely think that's true. I think there is some confusion over a lot of the regulations, at least from what we're hearing. So we're getting a lot of outreach from different university and colleges now interested in our program because of this requirement that the schools provide an advisor. However, there's actually a lot of confusion over the geographic jurisdiction provision of the new Title IX regs, especially for New York City schools, which are not on campus the way that we would think about more larger universities, and whether or not certain cases that would have been considered under Title IX before, the schools may decide not to or don't have to investigate because they won't be under this on-campus provision, and maybe happened in a private apartment, for instance, where many sexual violence and gender violence cases in New York City schools happen.
Joe, what kind of questions are you finding?
Programs and activities, what Jessica was just referencing is indeed, because it's not the way we traditionally think of things. We think of, as Jessica referenced, kind of on campus, off campus, private apartments, or some institutions, fraternity and sorority houses. And now we have this sort of wrinkle in there, which is, was it within a program or activity? So that is something that is going to be a challenge. And I will share, transparently, we do trainings for folks all over the country, and people who have dedicated their lives to this, their careers to this, who've worked years, are having trouble understanding the final rule. And I'm on lists with attorneys who go back and forth and say, do you read it this way? Do you read it that way? As if it's this Talmudic, thing where we're trying to get through the 2,000 pages and say, page 878 says this, but page 474 says this, and which one is it? And that's what really scares me, is that folks like me who this is what we do are, say I'm not sure what they mean by this. And sometimes I get that question in trainings. I say, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I'm waiting for them to put out an answer on their blog, which they've promised to do. We haven't actually gotten them, but they promised to do that. And so what scares me about that is the survivors who come in to see Jessica, or the students that Elizabeth and her team see at a Got Your Back event, some of whom are first generation college students, some of whom don't speak English as a first language, some of whom are just not year lawyers. They're first year college students. How are they supposed to understand it? And the push in New York, when the governor worked on 129B, and Elizabeth, I know you were involved in that, and many people around New York State were involved in it. And every single person was saying, simplify, plain language, clear, no more legalese. We'd come out with something from the counsel's office, and it'd be like, okay, but how do we say this shorter and clearer? And we were on board, right? In the governor's counsel's office, everybody was on board. How do we say it in the clearest way? And there has yet to be the first bill to amend anything about 129B. We have not seen from Democrats, from Republicans, Assembly, Senate, Governor, nothing to change it, because, and was it perfect? No, nothing's perfect, but, I think it did a pretty good job, and it was very clear. Here, I think there's some very good, very well-placed criticism that this is very unclear. There are some other areas that I'm seeing that are confusing. Who has to bring forward? So in the entryway to the Title IX process, who is a person with authority? We have used the phrase responsible employee since the late 1990s. And so now that's gone, replaced by this person with authority. Who's a person with authority? I have no idea. Every college has to designate persons with authority, but with unclear definitions. You go into the program and you have to have a formal complaint. There's supportive measures, and the supportive measures can't unduly impinge on the respondent. So what does that include? What does that not include? A supportive measure cannot also be a sanction. A sanction cannot also be a supportive measure. So when you're thinking about this, you have to think, well, what would we need downstream and what would we need upstream? The process might take 90 days. It might take 120 days. It might take a year. There are these built-in long blocks of time. There's incredibly complicated notice and investigative reports and challenges, and things have to be shared. All of you should be aware, and those of you who know me, I'm always about lowering blood pressure, and this is what I'm going to say is going to raise blood pressure. There is a requirement that the institution share the evidence, the records, any evidence that's directly related, even if it's not relevant, directly related, with the parties and their advisors of choice. The advisor of choice could be someone like Jessica, a well-regarded attorney, deeply trained, or it could be their mom. It could be their college buddy. It could, frankly, be somebody else who abused this person, who they think they're bringing in strategically. There is no limitation on that. Now, the evidence has to be shared, and there's a question in the preamble where somebody says to the department, well, surely you can't mean if somebody takes naked or otherwise illicit photos of somebody, surely you can't mean that they would have to share those photos with the parties and the advisors of choice. And the department says, absolutely, you have to share those photos, but don't worry, you can tell the students not to reshare them. And if telling students not to do something was
That's like telling them to wear a mask.
well, right. I mean, if telling students not to do something and they didn't do it, I would be out of a job. And happily so, frankly. There's plenty of other stuff I could go do. So that's something that's really scary. And if you're a student who's had illicit photos taken of you, photos of you in undress, photos of you as a victim of assault, I think there's going to be some considerations before providing that to the college if you know it's going to have to be shared.
Sorry.
Oh.
That's David.
Oh,
Are you there?
Elizabeth, you are a bit cutting out. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm having trouble with the pack.
We do have some more questions. I'm not sure if there was more discussion around what Joe was saying. So one of the questions for Jessica, again, is regarding your program. It was, does the victim have to be a student? Can they come from a referral from another program?
That's a great question. While my program does mainly work with student survivors of gender violence because we are specifically trained to work in the Title IX system as well as the others, we do always work with non-student survivors if there is a need. Sanctuary as a whole provides representation within family court and criminal justice system, the criminal justice system for survivors of gender violence in general. I specifically, the Campus Advocates Project, will take consultations and advocacy with non-student survivors if there is a specific need for criminal justice advocacy, or if my expertise as a former sex crimes prosecutor can be helpful. And we have taken referrals from other agency providers and other gender violence organizations, as well as colleges and universities, for non-student cases when there is that specific need for criminal justice, either information or advocacy, or someone would like to speak to a former prosecutor or someone who was, former law enforcement about, what does this mean? What's this going to look like? Can you explain to me what the grand jury is? Most people don't know what that is because it's not on Law and Order, right? It's the part on Law and Order that's not on. And it's actually a hugely important part of prosecuting a sexual violence case in New York. And we do a complete rundown of what the grand jury looks like. I mean, I draw it out for people who come to see me, what it looks like, who's going to be in there, what they can expect from questions, and that really goes from the time that you speak to police all the way through to, trial and victim impact sentencing. So yes, we do work with non-student survivors, although the main focus of our program is for student survivors.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful. We have a question regarding the cross-examination provision of the new Title IX regulations. Has there been any discussion about whether schools will provide advocates and/or attorneys to both parties?
I can definitely answer. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. We have definitely gotten a lot of interest from schools and universities who are thinking about providing attorneys. They would have to provide advisors to both sides and are thinking about providing attorney advisors and are trying to figure out the financial way to do this, to provide attorneys to both sides, which can be a huge financial undertaking for a small college or university or a state or city university. So while the college is not required to provide an advisor, many have been, or an attorney as an advisor, they are providing an advisor. We're hoping that they will be opting to use attorneys who have had experience doing cross-examination, like, for instance, my project or others who might be, seasoned trial or litigation attorneys who have done cross-examination and will feel comfortable doing so in these new proceedings.
And I would just add to what Jessica said that there's only an obligation to provide an advisor in the cross-examination part. So there is plenty that precedes the hearing, and there's quite a bit that follows the hearing. There is no obligation to provide that, and the only obligation to provide an advisor is if the student does not bring an advisor of choice. That advisor of choice can be an attorney, but as I said earlier, it can be really anybody. So that is primary. The student always has the choice primary. And if the student does not have one, whether frankly they ask for it or not, because agency is removed a bit here, you must force an advisor upon a student, either victim, survivor, or a respondent. If they do not have one, for the purposes of cross-examination, they may not directly conduct the cross-examination, and it appears that they may not waive the cross-examination part. So you will, as an institution, have to provide an advisor. But again, as Jessica said, that person does not have to be an attorney, and that is a sort of a campus by campus policy decision.
So Joe, is that a big change, allowing anybody to be an advisor?
Allowing anybody to be advisor is not itself a huge change. We have long allowed parents, faculty members to be advisors because higher education has not overly legalized or has worked to not overly legalize these processes. These are educational processes, and we try to treat them as educational processes. For the longest time, students would answer for themselves, speak for themselves, and people would say, why? And the part of the answer is equity. You know, we have students who come to SUNY schools who come from tremendous resources and have the ability to hire whole fleets of very, very high level attorneys. And we have students who come from very poor families who might be first generation. We have students who are orphans whose prior address is ward of the state of New York before they come to college. And so having the students participate directly does a little bit of leveling the playing field between those who can hire literally $1,000 an hour attorney and those who could not. It's not so much who's serving as the advisor, it's the role of the direct cross-examination, which we had almost seen this, not quite this far, in a Sixth Circuit case, Doe versus Baum out of Michigan, but never here in the Second Circuit, never in New York State. And in fact, our Court of Appeals has ruled on these cases. The courts in New York have ruled on these cases and never made that requirement. So this would be forced upon colleges by the federal government that the state of New York, the legislature did not require it, could have, and did not. Our courts did not require it, could have, and did not. So for me, the concern is not so much who the advisor is, it's what they would be doing, including the cross-examination, live and direct. SUNY has, I should say, long had cross-examination through the panel, where a party would submit a question in writing to the panel. The hearing officer would look at it. If it was an allowable question, they would ask it, but in a neutral tone, get the answer. Then the student would submit their next question in writing, or maybe a list of them. Here it would be direct. Elizabeth, when you said this, did you mean this? Did you say that? You know, all of that. And we can put some decorum standards around that, but it's certainly a sea change.
So someone who doesn't have the financial means might come to a hearing with their cousin. At the same time, the respondent would be there with a very experienced attorney.
Yeah, and what we've seen, frankly, is that you have to think of the economics. If you're a victim or survivor, let's say OVS did not exist. Let's say Sanctuary for Families did not exist, and it was all private pay. So who are you going to ask? What are your economic incentives to go through the process? Most of our victims and survivors choose not to go through the criminal justice process, the college process, the civil process. We all know those statistics. And are they going to go into debt? Are they going to go, take out a mortgage on their home in order to hire an attorney to participate in the process? Probably not. Are they going to even call their parents, who would be able, ones maybe who could provide the funds to hire an attorney? Maybe not. Now, let's think of the economics on the other side. You're a respondent. What's the first thing you do? You call your parents and you say, "This is
I need a lawyer."
I need a lawyer. And I know of cases where parents have spent significant sums of money, for advisors for their students. So frankly, without something like Sanctuary for Families and the other programs out there, it is and frankly, even if there was, because Sanctuary for Families couldn't possibly serve all, million students in New York. I don't know how many students there are in New York State. It's an unlevel playing field just based on the economics. And of course, we're talking about beyond New York, 50 states, and what does North Dakota have? Does North Dakota have a Sanctuary for Families? I couldn't say. I have my doubts. So the economics. So the Department of Education says, oh, it's equitable. We just say, oh, bring an attorney if you want to bring an attorney, as if that was enough. But there are different incentives for people who are accused of violations and then those who disclose that those violations occurred to them.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're getting to close to our closing time. We've gone over. I appreciate, Rachel and Blake, that you kept it open, because I think the discussion is so important. Are there any last minute words you'd like to provide, Jessica?
Just that if you happen to know a student who might, or anyone who might benefit from our services, please feel free to contact me. I think my email is in the PowerPoint, and we can talk offline about what services, we can provide, and, what that survivor's best pathway to safety and justice might be, because we really want to provide that information, make those connections, especially during a time like the pandemic when so many survivors feel so disconnected from, help and resources. We're trying to bring the message that survivors of sexual violence and gender violence are not alone.
Great. Elizabeth, B?
I am having some power and I think maybe internet issues right now, so forgive me if you can't hear me. But I, we're just really grateful to our colleagues at the OVS and our colleagues all across the state, as we all continue to navigate uncharted waters and a really difficult time, and that SUNY will continue to try to provide resources and work with our partners to provide resources and help folks as best we can. And our emails, I think, are on there as well, so feel free to reach out, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Elizabeth said, how grateful we are for this webinar, and great to meet and work with Jessica, and thank you to you, Elizabeth, for hosting again. If you do have an update to SAVR, just click that button right at the bottom and we will get that taken care of. And I do hope that many of you will join us for SUNY Spectrum. It is because of some major savings we've been able to do. It's only $25 per person, and we do have scholarships available even at that rate. There's a link right on the website to request it. Our goal,
an incredible conference.
Yeah, and our goal is never to make money, it's to make it as accessible as possible. So if you want to register, it's only $25, which helps us cover the cost of the technology and some of the other stuff that we have to do to make sure it's secure. And if it's something that's something you're not able to do, there's essentially a no questions asked scholarship. So please do join us. It's the week of August 24th to 28th. Elizabeth and her folks have put together an incredible lineup of speakers. Elizabeth Cronin is going to be with us in one of our programs, and we hope everyone can join us, and we'll all stay in touch. And if there's interest in doing more of this in the fall, answering more questions, we'll happily do it. It's a real privilege.
Thank you so much to our participants, to Blake and Rachel again for setting up this program. I want to thank Elizabeth, our ASL interpreter. She did an amazing job, and we're so thrilled that we were able to have her available to offer that service to some of our participants. And I just want to end on saying that this issue is so complicated and so important. And, when we did the first Title IX webinar, we didn't anticipate following it up with another one. But after we finished it, we said, you know what? there's a lot unsaid here. We need to do it again. And frankly, I'm feeling the same way about this program. Not that we didn't get to a lot of stuff, but I'm still feeling like there's so much to unpack here. So if the folks on, that are participating, if you are interested in more of this, please let us know, whether you want to put it in the chats or you want to send us emails, or, Blake or Rachel or Joe or Elizabeth, or Jessica, if you'd like to hear more of this, I think we'd love to put something else together and just keep talking, and hopefully trying to get CLE credit for those attorneys on the program. So thanks again to everybody, and please stay safe in this weird storm and this weird time. And maybe we'll see you at Title IX 3.0. Thanks, everyone.
Yes. Elizabeth, thank you. Just as people are jumping off, you will be redirected to a SurveyMonkey link. It is not spam. It is not malware. That is a great place. There's some open-ended portions where you can tell us what you're looking for and if you'd like this. That would be a great place to put that.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.